I felt in real estate, I was really trading time for money and navigating a tremendous amount of burnout. Through my journey professionally, I've learned that my why is my family. It's why I get out of bed and working with people. And when I was navigating being a real estate entrepreneur, with project marketing, um, I just didn't have the time to be present for my family and felt like I was on the phone 24/7 and just felt like it was very transactional and wasn't really making the impact at a relational level to people. So that journey was one of a little bit of spirited belief that there was no challenge I couldn't overcome. And thankfully, because I didn't come from a gaming or a mobile gaming background or marketing background for that matter, I just had the opportunity to not look at the challenges as challenges, but rather actually opportunities that I could learn and overcome from. My strength has always been the excitement to learn new things. And I consider myself an expert generalist. So it's like a big puzzle and problem I'm trying to solve. So that journey, at the end, I think I touched on this at the beginning. I really wanted to be involved in starting a business that made an impact. And in business, you have to constantly recognize that there are trends. And mobile gaming at the time, this was in 2015 or 2014, was a growing industry, and that looked really promising and provided a real opportunity to connect and grow themes that I was passionate about in an underserved audience. I'm from Canada. So for those that don't know, in 2015, cannabis legalized. And the big buzz of our country at the time was, people getting in the industry from sort of a growing and production standpoint. And as I sort of assessed that industry, I realized that A, there was a massive underserved audience, and B, the belief of the businesses and industries that people were going to go to were probably going to get saturated quite quickly. We also recognized that, for mobile gaming, the large studios were unlikely to touch on those themes and trends, just from a sort of policy and normalization standpoint. So given all that, I think we had a really unique opportunity. We had the opportunity of timing and vision on our side to develop the world's most popular cannabis game. And that was really the foundation of LBC Studios. So why? I mean, the industry has changed a lot since that time. It's 2024 now. It's hard to believe. I've been doing this for 9 years and I've gotten a lot more gray hairs along the way. But really, this industry has evolved from making good gaming experiences to really an industry of data, an industry of science, from design, development, art, creativity, marketing, for the purposes of this podcast, from retention and user experiences. It's just really grown into a real science. And at its core, the ability to market and scale games profitably and successfully has become more challenging, and we have to become more effective to be successful. We've learned on this journey, you have to be really data informed and take really calculated risks. So at LBC, even the way I look at this business is kind of like the way I've grown in my own life. You start with an idea and you mature along the way, and you stumble and fall, and you learn from your mistakes, and you get better, and you navigate the external changes in the industry, but you also, foster your own identity as a business and as people in the industry. So our team at LBC, which is mostly based in Vancouver and across Canada, is really about the people. It's really about the idea of building fun games. We've gone through many iterations of who we are over the years, and this year is one where we feel really confident that we're planting our sort of flag in the sand in terms of who we are and what we build and how we build it. We're made up of product teams, marketing teams, data teams, leadership teams, and we really support the full cycle of game development and publishing. And it's very clear what we try to do. So our purpose is really just to make fun and engaging games that make an impact to millions of people worldwide. And with that simple and clear statement, it touches on everything that's important to me, but also important to the team. And we talked about impact at the beginning. We talked about why people play games, because they need to be fun. As gamers and developers in our company, they really want those games to be played by people. And as it pertains to, retention and marketing, ultimately, you have to be successful in scaling great games so that they can actually be played by millions of people. I have a teenage daughter and also a young daughter as well. And you can see it, you can see it in the experiences that they choose to engage with. there is a lot of options out there. There's more and more apps and more games in the ecosystem, and there's more and more ways to engage with it. Mobile was a growing sector. There's a resurgence of PC platform web. There's just so many options for people in terms of where they want to engage with their community, the types of experiences and entertainment they want to play with. So at its core, we've always believed that games have to be fun. But we also recognize attention spans are shorter. And as I mentioned, there's just more options for discerning gamers than there ever has been before. So at LBC, at its core, to give a little bit of context, we believe we have built all kinds of games, everything from simulation, idle, match three, rhythm, physics games. But we've really learned it's not about being great at everything. It's about being great at what your core identity is and really being an expert in your lane. And so for us, our expertise lies in simulation, invest in express games. We're very focused on this category moving forward. And so benchmarking is very, very critical. It's not just about being the best inside our company or benchmarking against Hempire, for example, as our most successful game. It's really looking at the whole ecosystem and understanding that when you look at benchmark reports and simulation games, whether it's from your distribution partners, your marketing partners, your attribution partners, you start to realize that there ultimately is a decline in retention across the board. And those declines they range depending on geo. So there's growing sectors, there's other sectors that are declining. So depending on the games you develop, it's really important to be informed about your category, how it performs at a geo level, how your themes might be adapted to different cultures. So sometimes you might have a great simulation game for us with Hempire in the United States, but you're not going to be able to scale that game in Asian markets where there might, be social cultural norms against those types of themes. And with our newest theme that we're about to soft launch in 3 weeks, we recognize that it actually has more of a global appeal, but we need to understand at a benchmark level, what are the expectations of that game and that theme in those different geos, rather than just looking at our core markets. So I think that's important. There's been a big push of adapting to different cultures, even in what the storyline means and how you present that. Different markets are growing differently, as we sort of mentioned, and they're looking for different content. So from a marketing perspective, you really need to think marketing at a granular level, adapt campaigns, creatives, and expectations accordingly. And for the product, I think the same rings true. Understanding the game types and themes for each market really helps you identify where your users come from and what your expectations should be. So for us, retention has always been the magic first KPI at its core. We used to talk about all the features we wanted to add into a game. What do we got to add on top? And, what are these, classic monetization mechanics that we have to build in? But at its core, if you're getting all these users in the game and they're not sticking around, they're never going to get the opportunity to experience those add-on benefits. And that is, again, the magic first KPI. If you don't have a fun and healthy top of funnel bucket, adding more on top isn't going to make it better. And I think we can all recognize that in this industry, discoverability, changes to privacy and data law has just made it harder and harder and more costly to get the users. So you have to make sure that you're maximizing their value and really building customers for life. I think you can't ignore the historical critical KPIs. They're part of the picture. So for us, retention, again, has always been critical. And ultimately, from a business reporting standpoint, from the marketing team, we still look at ROAS as a critical indicator of our ability to scale marketing campaigns. But if you get lost in those KPIs, you kind of lose the bigger picture and the changes and trends in the industry. So a big underlying approach for us at a leadership level and ultimately throughout the organization is just to really understand the value for our players. A theme I often say in our meetings is we're building customers for life. And what does that actually mean? The more we have direct contact with our players and customers, the better we can leverage and deliver value in the ecosystem of games. So we went through this interesting, we actually just announced our 3-year strategic last week. And, an exercise I had the team go through is I said, punch in ChatGPT and ask, what is the most popular Wii game? And Hempire came up. And I said, how special does that actually feel that, given all the algorithms and data that's out there, we lead this category. But we also don't want our customers and players to think of LBC as just Hempire. What would it look like if people said, what is the leader in the Canadian game market? And there was LBC. And inside that organization, there was different themes that appealed to different audiences. And recognizing when I say customers for life, that's what I really mean, is that we may get a user into Hempire that really isn't aligned with that theme. But how do we make sure that we're retaining that person to give them an experience that they do value, or even inside our core games, that they have an experience where we can provide them value inside the game, outside the game, and in our ecosystem as LBC. And so from a practical standpoint, it's changing the narrative for our players, right? And there are steps that we're looking to do. So we have to balance things like, how do we monetize our players, thinking about hybrid models that actually enhance the experience rather than detract from, retention, for example. We have to give players, I think there's a growing trend in terms of how do they spend and where they spend. So thinking about other alternative methods and different ways for them to get extra value outside of the core ecosystem. We have to provide different journeys. So I think it's also about thinking about the player journey, right? Are they coming into the game and are they a regular spender, in which case you have to give a clear proposition? Are they an ad watcher? What does that proposition look like? On the marketing side, I think it's also important that we capture users in different geos. And it's not just about let's localize a game. It's thinking about how and what do those geos actually want? Can we create cultural, relevance and significance for them? Can we give them the right creatives and the right campaigns so that we're getting high value users, not just getting users? I think retention also needs to be looked at a geo level. So people globally, just the reality is, have operated and behaved differently in terms of retention, session, and paying patterns. And really understanding our products and how they connect with those campaigns and scale efficiently. For our core game, for example, we were looking at data last month with Hempire. We had 300,000 users, and I won't say specifically what the amount of paying, like new users come into the game. And I won't say specifically the amount of paying users, but the reality is a huge portion of those users never convert. And so how do we actually take that large bucket and make sure that we're not just losing them in the top of the funnel and having to rebuy them, months later on a brand new game? How do we actually capture them early? They may not become paying players, but how do we get contact points with them? Can we give them login sessions or keep them on our newsletters, or, find ways and work with partners to re-engage those users, perhaps for a future product, or give them value in the game that they didn't convert on? We just have to not accept that 90% of our users are going to be gone in 30 days, or that 95 are never going to buy. I think that mindset has to shift. At the start, you can have these ideas, right? These ambitious statements that, like you said, we're not going to lose 90% of our users, or 95% isn't an okay metric in terms of not spending behavior. But how do you validate that? How as a team do you really understand what's going on and what you can do about it? So from a data standpoint, there's a big shift for us 3 years ago. We have a robust internal data team. It's absolutely critical to your business. And we review signals all the time. And the reality with data is, you collect so much of this data, and you have to be very selective in what you choose to actually analyze, or you can get into this sort of analysis paralysis of overwhelming amount of data. And the reality is it doesn't give you the answer, right? You can get lost in that data and sometimes forget the bigger picture. So just remembering those pillars of why are we looking at this and what is ultimately our goal and what we try to deliver. So data signals don't tell you why something is not working or working really well. It gives you a symptom, for example. You might see a lower retention curve than you were expecting in your game. And as a team, you have to collaborate and really decide how each discipline can come up with a hypothesis around those signals to provide solutions and measure impact. And so for us, we get together as a company every quarter and we talk about goals, and we don't say, here's what you want, what you need to do, or how you're going to do it. It's just, here are the overarching goals. And the teams come together from marketing, data, and product, and they talk about the potential hypotheses of what can improve and where they feel they can move the needle. And so what you have to do is you have to experiment. You have to experiment often, but you have to do it with intention, with those clear goals and clear ways to measure what those changes do to the product or to the marketing, so you understand what worked and what didn't work. And sometimes moving the needle slightly at a product or marketing level is honestly really difficult. Like we go through large cycles and we might move 1% retention needle. Or, I'll give a very clear example in just a second. But at a leadership we're always thinking bigger and trying to provide bigger value propositions in terms of how you experience our games. And as I mentioned early on, our studio. So providing incentives to play other games in our ecosystem and creating consistency in our identity, those are all critical ideas. But here's a real world example. In our core game Hempire, we have developed a robust, I guess you could call it a collaboration system, a guild system. And what we noticed in our data was that, people weren't messaging as often as we wanted. And so the hypothesis was, let's move the guild system up sooner in the game. And that's going to result in more people engaged in guilds and ideally potentially more retention and in turn more monetization. And we did the work and we got the report a couple of weeks ago, and absolutely, something that we expected. 10x people went into the guild system. People were messaging more. Interestingly, though, they spent less. And so you have these positive signals and these negative signals, and then you have to ask yourself, like, was it a win or is it a failure? And it might actually be both. It's maybe, okay, we've got them in, but we're not actually giving them the value or understanding of what this mechanic is or why they should spend. And so it's not one was right or one was wrong. It gives you your next set of experiments to sort of build off of that and go, we've moved an important KPI, but at the cost of another one. Where do we go next? And that's what kicks off that conversation between design, product, marketing, and leadership to understand how we can leverage that. I mean, they're not small lifts. So, I talked about laying out our 3-year strategic last year. We have these overarching pillars and values that we sort of drive towards. We don't know what the results are going to be in 3 years, and you can make up those answers. But I think ultimately understanding, our core economic engine, what our people are passionate about, and what we're the best in the world at, essentially our hedgehog, helps sort of drive the efforts that we do. And really understanding our flywheel in terms of what creates successful games in our company and our values of people, passion, and play. If we have those sort of overarching goals, as we whittle that down to annual goals and quarterly goals, it really creates clarity in terms of here's exactly what we want to move, because it moves us towards the bigger picture. And so for us, as we become focused on the simulation category, we really started to think about connecting our games through LBC-centric logins, thinking about payment options, thinking about ways where we can give value add outside of the game and leveraging our data internally to really understand customer needs and expectations. It's not just about what does LBC want to achieve, it's how do we connect the dot with our players and make sure we're giving them what they're actually looking for. Ultimately, our customers matter. Like they're the key to our success. And, we talked about this in one of the previous questions. You have 300,000 people that you've spent money on to get in your game. And you lose, 270,000 of those in 30 days. There's such an opportunity in that to bring value and change the model. And we really want to think about, let's not think about that as an acceptable outcome. Let's change the outcome and the expectations as a company. And it is a big goal. It's lofty and it starts with little steps. So we know getting that first customer is costly, and it's on us to ensure that once they experience one of our games, we do everything to give them the best experience possible, provide them value, keep them in our ecosystem long-term. We have to change the mindset that we're not just going to keep players or that only a small percentage will convert. We're going to provide real value and as much as possible. And if we lose a customer today, and I think this sort of touches on changes in marketing behavior and trends, it doesn't mean we've lost them forever. And so the more that we have sort of these connecting points to them, and the more that we work with our external partners and look at new trends and evolution in terms of retention and re-engagement, losing them today, maybe we can deliver them value in the future. Maybe it's in the same game, maybe it's in a new game. Finding the right pair between the right game, the right data to re-engage in our future is critical.